So I don't give it any scientific validity. I just think it's sort of fun to think about that people in different parts of the world are interested in different things. Where we really dig in deeper, what we see is, of course, in every part of the world, people are very interested in local politics and in local issues. And that's where Wikipedia is a very, very powerful thing, that people can come and learn about things that are relevant to their lives. So as I mentioned earlier, we have over 400 million people visiting the website every month. We've got this massive body of work that we've accomplished so far, a lot of work left to do. And so the natural question that people have is, who are the Wikipedians? Who's writing this? Why do we want to know who Wikipedians are? Well, this slide we have a picture of a swarm of bees. And this is an analogy that I hate. It's an analogy you'll often see in the press of swarm intelligence and the idea of bees in a hive. But Wikipedians aren't bees. They're human beings. They're very interesting human beings and very real people. And they have a huge, huge impact on culture. One of the reasons why. This is a real quote from Twitter from a librarian who says, "Yesterday I asked one of my students if she knew what an encyclopedia is, and she said, 'Is it something like Wikipedia?'" So for young people who are in school today, say, well, Wikipedia is 10 years old. So if you know a 10-year-old, Wikipedia's existed for their whole life. Certainly, if you know a 16-year-old, Wikipedia's existed the whole time that they've been studying in school and reading. For a whole generation that's coming next, Wikipedia is central to the way they think about the world. For everyone in this room, even though we all lived before Wikipedia, it still is something that we think of as we go there often, it's a place we go for information. It's culturally really, really important. So it's really important for us to think about who's writing it, who are these people. So just some numbers. We did an internal survey. It was self-selected, so there's always problems with self-selected surveys, but we think it's fairly representative. I go all around the world and meet Wikipedians, and it seems fairly accurate to me. So Wikipedia community is about 87% male. We don't think this is a good thing. We think this is a bad thing. We would like to have more diversity in the community. But this is typical of basically a lot of technologically oriented activities. We think one of the main reasons we don't have as many women in Wikipedia is the same reason, interestingly enough, that we don't have my father in Wikipedia, which is that when you go click to edit, it's too complicated, and it's not that women can't learn technology. Don't quote me as saying that. It's the opposite. It's like the super geeks in computer science tend to be male, and they're really, really good at Wikipedia, and all the rest of us struggle a bit. So we're working to make the interface easier to use. We're working to be more welcoming to more people because we think that's really important. The average age of the community is 26, so that's fairly young, but it's not as young as a lot of the popular websites. And in our community, we have about double the percentage of PhDs compared to the general public. So we're a well-educated and geeky community. This isn't to say that we're mostly written by PhDs, but we have a lot of PhDs in the community compared to the general public, as you would expect. So one of the good ways to think about it, or a funny way to think about it, is in terms of a Venn diagram. The Wikipedians are the people who are here at the intersection between intelligence, obsession, and a lot of free time. Because people spend many, many hours, I spend too many hours myself editing Wikipedia or arguing some fine point of an article. And so these are the people who are writing Wikipedia. They do so with some basic principles. Some of the principles we have, we call it NPOV, neutral point of view. Wikipedia tries really hard to be neutral, meaning on any controversial issue, Wikipedia shouldn't take a stand. It should merely explain to you all of the major positions. This has been a really powerful technique to get people who have very different ideas to work together. Some people say, well, how can it work if two people have very different ideas? Don't they just argue and fight and change it back and forth? Sometimes they do, but we get really annoyed when that's all that people do. Instead, what we say is, look, find a way to compromise. If you can't come to an agreement about the underlying issue, at least come to an agreement about how to present the argument so that anyone can read it and understand what you're fighting about. And that works very, very well. Another basic principle of our community is assume good faith. What we say here is if you see somebody doing something wrong in Wikipedia, you shouldn't assume that they're a bad person or that they're causing trouble intentionally. Maybe they're just making a mistake. Maybe they just need you to reach out and say, hey, why are you doing this? It doesn't seem like it's very productive, and can I help you? And let's do something better. Now, it's also important to say that we only assume good faith. We don't assume good faith forever. In the initial instance, if somebody's misbehaving, typically, and we know this as an empirical fact, You see someone misbehaving and you say, hey, you know, we're trying to make an encyclopedia and what you're doing doesn't seem helpful. Can I help you? Can we find a way to resolve this? And most people respond really well. Some people don't, and eventually they get banned from the community. It's fairly rare, but it happens. Because some people are absolutely unable to work well with others, and that's unfortunate but true. For us, it's really important, though, that the encyclopedia comes first. We're not an open free speech platform. We're trying to do something good for humanity, and people who are willing to come and help us and behave, well, that's great. So, no personal attacks. We say in our community, if you disagree with someone, disagree with their idea, disagree with what's being put on the page, explain yourself with a valid argument, don't start calling people names. Again, this generally works. Obviously, sometimes people get upset and they get angry and they call someone a name and they apologize. But I think it's really important in healthy online communities, they have certain ground rules like this where you say, look, we're not going to attack each other. That's just really a waste of time. Let's focus on the content. Things like reliable sources. One of the things that we do in Wikipedia is we are really very critical of what we will count as a source. We want to have good, high-quality scientific journals, academic journals, quality newspapers, quality magazines. What counts as a good source depends on the context, of course. If you're talking about something that was said, by Yasser Arafat, a newspaper, preferably 2 or 3 good newspapers that report the same thing, that's reliable. If you're thinking about a science topic, though, you'd much rather have a scientific journal than a newspaper, because popular reports of newspapers are often a little misleading. So, what counts as a reliable source depends on the context. And our goal is quality. This is something that really unites the community. It's the idea, we're here to make a good quality encyclopedia. We don't always get it right, but that's our goal, and that helps us to decide things. If we try and decide, should we do this or that, quality is one of the things that we look at first. And I think this is one of the interesting benefits of us being a charity, that we're a non-profit organization. So when the Wikimedia Foundation or when the community thinks about what's the right thing to do, well, if you're a popular website, if you're Facebook or something, and you're trying to decide what's the right thing to do at Facebook, yeah, quality of experience is important, but what you're really after is how popular is it? How much ad revenue can we generate? For us, it's really just the quality. We stop right there. So to humanize Wikipedia, to give you more of an idea of who the Wikipedians are, last summer we did a series of videos, and I'm going to show you some now, and I'll show you a few more at the end of the lecture, where we interviewed Wikipedians about their experiences in Wikipedia to give you an idea of who are the Wikipedians. So I'm going to click now, and we're going to watch a short video.
If you have knowledge, why you must keep it by yourself? You must share it, I think.
I liked that the purpose of this website didn't say website, didn't say wiki, didn't say internet, it just said free knowledge for everyone in their own language.
When a community is open, it's really made of those who dare taking this invitation. And this is an invitation. Of course, you don't have to take an invitation, but there is an invitation out there in an edit button to say, come be part. What you know is as important as what we know.
You know, you're giving education to people, and not just any people, but the whole of the world. So I feel great by contributing to an encyclopedia that is accessible to virtually everyone in the whole world.
It's just making yourself happy by helping others, that's it. Because I want to be happy, I help others. You're working together with so many different people from so many different cultures, and it's just amazing.
The thing about it, for me, what it's really about, it's just really sweet people. We've got all these really sweet people who are they get online and they're typing, and instead of yelling at each other or just having a conversation or reading about gossip or whatever, they're trying to build something that everybody else will find useful. I just think it's really sweet, really nice people.
Okay, great. So, as I mentioned earlier, we are organized as a non-profit organization. So the Wikimedia Foundation is the charity that I set up, which owns and operates Wikipedia. And the interesting thing about our organization is, although we are now the number 5 website in the world, over 400 million people a month, we're actually still a very small organization. We have only 70 employees. Our budget for this year is just over $20 million US dollars. And so we're really quite a small thing. And the reason we can do this is that for the 70 employees, there are 100,000 volunteers. And it's really the volunteers, it's the people who write Wikipedia, are the ones who really are important. When you go to visit Wikipedia and you look on the website, everything you see is generated by the community. Even the choice of which article to be the featured article of the day on the homepage, that's not done by someone in the office. That's done by the community through an open process. And that's been really, really important to the values of Wikipedia and to the values of our community, that we remain very community-based. The employees are involved with software development, keeping the website running. Of course, we have accounting, finance, legal. Someone answers the phones. We have communications people to deal with all the incoming press inquiries. So it takes a small staff. And increasingly, we've become more successful financially, although we're still quite small. And so we're beginning to do new kinds of outreach programs, outreach to universities, outreach to different languages in different places. We're opening our first office outside the U.S. in India, and I'm going to talk a little bit about India now. Because we're starting to look and think about the future. Instead of just growing Wikipedia organically, we're saying, how do we get into all the languages of the world? So just to talk a little bit about India as an interesting example. So India, as you may know, has over 20 official languages. It's a very linguistically complex place. And some of the languages are Hindi has 67,000, Telugu 47,000, Marathi 32,000, Tamil 27,000, Bengali 22,000. So these are the number of articles in these languages. This is just a handful of the Indian languages. But if you think about Hindi, Hindi is a language with over 280 million speakers. And for them to only have 67,000 articles means that they're quite far behind. There's a lot of reasons for this, and the reasons are exactly what you would expect. Literacy rate matters. So if people can't read, obviously they can't write an encyclopedia. Access to technology matters. We see that when people are really active editors, they become active editors once they have a fast broadband connection, because it makes it easy to really function online. If people are using a slow connection or they don't have a connection at all, obviously they're going to have trouble contributing. Some other barriers exist. In many languages, keyboard entry methods are difficult, so it's hard to type Hindi on an English keyboard. And there are solutions to that, but we currently don't support all those solutions, and so that's a focus in the next year or two, is to say how can we do some technical improvements so that people in India find it easier to participate. So we focused on India first, but we're going to be expanding into other parts of the world.